Hello everyone, I hope you're well. I wanted to come back to you guys with a bit of a book haul. I have purchased quite a few books over the past few months or so I thought it would be fun to share them with you and just give you a look at what I got. So a few of these books are from my Europe trip. So recently I went to Paris and Ireland, and I purchased quite a few books when I was there. So I'll show you those, as well as a few books that I've purchased in recent months just here in New York. I have a mix of new books and secondhand books. All of it is fiction, but yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a look at what I've bought recently and what I'll be reading in the upcoming months. So yeah, I thought we could just have a fun little time chatting about books. So grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever you want to drink, and let's chat books. Okay, so I'm thinking that I can just go in chronological order. So I visited Paris first. I actually only got one book in Paris. It was my first time there, so I tried to spend most of my time like exploring, so I didn't do a lot of shopping. But I did have to stop by Shakespeare & Co. If you don't know, it's a super famous bookstore in Paris, but there's 2 locations in New York, and then I'm not sure if there are any other locations, but the one in Paris is the original location of the bookstore, and it's very famous because a lot of renowned writers actually stayed like at the bookstore, lived there, wrote a lot of their novels, and had a lot of time to write about Paris living in this bookstore. So they were allowed to stay there for free, but under one condition, and that condition was to read a book a day. So I think that's really sweet, and I'm pretty sure it's a true story, and a lot of famous writers did actually live out of that bookstore. So I had to visit, and I would highly recommend visiting if you are ever in Paris. It's such a sweet little space, and it's very old, and you can tell that there's a lot of history there and that a lot was written there, and it's just a beautiful space to be in, regardless of if you're actually like shopping for books. So I had to check it out, but I did end up getting one book, and that book is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I saw this cover, and I've never seen this cover before. The one in the US is different, but I thought that it was just so pretty. I love these little like leaves and this very minimal design, so I thought I would get it, especially because this is a book I'm very much looking forward to reading, and I know I'm going to read. I've only read one James Baldwin book. This year I read Another Country by him, and he quickly became my favorite author of all time. So I'm very excited to read all of his works, but I know that Giovanni's Room especially is a very beloved book of his. So yeah, I'm very excited to read it. It's so short, so I'm like definitely going to savor it when I do read it. But yeah, that's Giovanni's Room. I don't know if I'm going to read it soon, just because I am kind of trying to savor all of his books, since there are a finite amount of them. So yeah, I'm very excited for that. And then also what I think is so cute, they stamped the book for me, so I always remember where I got it, and I think that's so cute. I love that, and it makes me like want to stamp more of my books. I know some people have like their own little like custom stamp with their name, which I think is kind of cool. So maybe that's something I'll do. But yeah, that's Giovanni's Room. Very excited for that. So that is the only book I got in Paris. Then after Paris, I went to Ireland, and I did the bulk of my book shopping there. So I visited Cork in Ireland, and there's, it's a sweet little town you can walk through, and there's, clothes shopping, but there's also book shopping. And I love Waterstones. If you don't know, that's like the European version of Barnes & Noble. It's like a huge bookstore with literally any book you could want. And so I always just spend a lot of time in there when I'm in Ireland. It's like my favorite thing to do there. Yeah, I went there and I got a lot of books, so I can go into those now. The first book that I got at Waterstones in Ireland is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is a book that I've wanted to read ever since it came out. The plot is very interesting, and so I was just immediately hooked when I heard what the book is about. And I can just read the back for you guys so that you can get an idea of what it's about. So, this is one hell of a story. It's just not hers to tell. When failed writer June Hayward witnesses her rival Athena Liu die in a freak accident, she sees her opportunity and takes it. So what if it means stealing Athena's final manuscript? So what if it means borrowing her identity? And so what if the first lie is only the beginning? Finally, June has the fame she always deserved, but someone is about to expose her. What happens next is entirely everyone else's fault. So yeah, that gives like a good idea of what the book is about. I actually read this on my flight back to New York. So I've already read this, but it was thoroughly entertaining and I definitely enjoyed it. It's kind of at points written in the style of like a thriller, but it's definitely similar to the thriller genre where you're just like on the edge of your seat and you can't put the book down because you just need to know what happens next. Yeah, it's just like, it's kind of like a car crash. Like you can't, like it's a disaster, but you can't look away from it. And yeah, I've just never read anything like it before. There's a lot in this book about like the publishing industry and like literary culture and the toxicity of the industry, and I thought that was very interesting because I think a lot of the knowledge of the industry is based off of Rebecca F. Kuang's personal experience, so it's interesting to think like, oh, parts of this are probably very accurate. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was very entertaining. The next books that I got in Ireland are all actually Japanese fiction. So the reason why I bought so much Japanese fiction while I was in Ireland is because I actually prefer a lot of the European, I prefer a lot of the European covers to the US covers. I don't know, I just think they're prettier sometimes, and I know I'm visiting Ireland pretty frequently because my boyfriend's family lives there, so I sometimes just like wait until I'm there to catch up on buying some Japanese fiction that I want to read. So the next few books are all Japanese fiction. I can start with speaking of cats, I can start with this book. It's called The Goodbye Cat by Hiro Arikawa. Apparently, I think this book, I'm pretty sure it follows the cats. Maybe I'm wrong, and it follows the humans that, you know, are in the cats' lives, but it seems to be about like various different cats and their lives and the lives of the humans that they're involved with. So I don't know, that sounds really cute. I obviously have a cat. And so I don't know, it just sounds sweet. I can read a little excerpt of the summary to give you a better idea. It says, bursting with empathy and love, The Goodbye Cat exquisitely explores the unstoppable cycle of life as we see how the steadiness and devotion of a well-loved cat never let us down. A huge bestseller in Japan, every page is a joyous celebration of the wondrousness of cats and why we cannot resist sharing our lives with them. It just sounds so cute, and I feel like any cat person would probably just enjoy reading this. Yeah, the cat lady in me is definitely showing, but it seems sweet. Like, look at the cover. I don't know, sometimes I just need like a cozy read in between like historical fiction or like a heavy classic novel. So I think this will be the perfect book for that. Staying on the theme of cats, I got I believe this is the third and fourth books in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. Yeah, so I've read the first and second, and I love these. They're also like very cozy, quick reads. Obviously they're pretty short. I also buy these in Europe because I don't think we have the paperback editions in the US, and I like them because they have this like little foiling detail on them that I think is so pretty. And so yeah, I always just wait to get them. So if you haven't heard of this series, it's about this like quaint little cafe in Japan where people can go grab a cup of coffee and basically time travel to the past to maybe like speak to someone that they can't speak to anymore or talk to someone that is important to them. Hi guys. I completely failed to mention basically the entire premise of the book. In this cafe, people can time travel to the past, but they can only stay in the past for as long as it takes for their cup of coffee to go cold. And the story basically revolves around like multiple characters and their experience traveling back to the past and their reasons for why they want to go back. It sounds like a lot, but it's actually quite a simple story about like love and humanness and grief. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a story that will like change your life necessarily, but it definitely makes you think about just like what it means to be human and the simple things in life that are important to us. So yeah, that's before the coffee gets cold. Love this series and I'm excited to keep reading. Yumi, stop. No. Lastly, for Japanese fiction, I picked up this book that I'm actually very excited to read. It's called Butter by Asako Yuzuki. I saw this reviewed on YouTube. I was excited to read it because I feel like most of the Japanese fiction I read is, like cozier vibes, like the books that I showed you before. I've read a few Japanese thrillers and I've really enjoyed them. One in particular that comes to mind is The Devotion of Suspect X, which I really enjoyed, and that's like a crime fiction novel. So yeah, I was excited to hear about a thriller coming out that has a very unique plot as well. So I can read the synopsis for you. Gourmet cook Manako Kaji sits in Tokyo detention house convicted of the serial murders of lonely businessmen who she is said to have seduced with her delicious home cooking. The case has captured the nation's imagination, but Kaji refuses to speak with the press. That is until journalist Rika Machida writes a letter asking for her recipe for beef stew, and Kaji can't resist writing back. Rika, the only woman in her news office, works late each night, rarely cooking more than ramen. As the visits unfold between her and Kaji, they seem closer to a master class in food than journalistic research. Rika hopes this gastronomic exchange will help soften the steely Kaji, but it seems that Rika might be the one changing. With each meal she eats, something is awakening in her body. Might she and Kaji have more in common than she once thought? So yeah, very interesting plot. I feel like a lot of Japanese fiction tends to get a bit surreal or like supernatural. So I'm curious if this will do that or if it will be like strictly like rooted in reality. So yeah, that's one thing I'm wondering about. But overall, I'm very like intrigued by this plot. I also love reading about like Japanese cuisine in books and like reading descriptions of Japanese food because I am half Japanese, so my favorite food is Japanese food. So when I can read about Japanese food, it just, I don't know, it scratches an itch in my brain. So I'm excited. I mean, it's a long book. I would think that they talk about food. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, that's Butter. Also, the Europe cover is so pretty. I love like the bloody handprint and the cow. I don't know, it's really cool. I can put the US cover here, but it doesn't compare. This one is much cooler. So yeah, that is it for Japanese fiction. I believe that's everything I got at Waterstones in Ireland. I did thrift one book. So I found this in a thrift store, a charity shop as they call it in Europe. This is Bridget Jones' Diary. I have heard this referenced many a time. I think there's a film as well as the book, but I know that it's an important book in the literary canon. It's written from the point of view of this woman who basically just like writes down journal entries. So I think you're just reading her journal entries and kind of living like in her internal dialogue. It's like a very satirical take on the experience of being a woman and just like the pains and struggles of womanhood. So that's very interesting to me. I think it might be entertaining and just a fun read. Also, I'm just excited to read it because it's referenced so much that I think it'll be nice to finally know what everyone's talking about. So it says this was published in 1996. I was gonna say, I feel like the premise of this book reminds me of A Year of Rest and Relaxation, which I haven't read either, but I feel like it's kind of got similar themes to it and approaches womanhood in a similar way. I obviously haven't read either of them, so I might be completely wrong, but I feel like this could either be hit or miss for me, just because I worry the humor might be a bit like millennial almost, which sounds bad, but I feel like satire for me can be very hit or miss. So I'm curious, I really am curious to see what I think about this book. I thought I would just end with a few books that I've gotten in the past few months here in New York. This is a book I picked up at Harper's Bazaar, which is a flea market on the west side. I just saw this in a stall and I feel like I'm dipping my toe into plays, so this is kind of a part of that. This is Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. I mean, this is another book that is so famous, or a play that is so famous, that I want to read it. I guess I would consider it a classic. So throughout the summer, I've read a couple of plays. So I read A Raisin in the Sun, which blew my mind. It was an incredible read. And then I read A Merchant in Venice, which is a Shakespeare play. And I kind of got into the rhythm of reading plays and becoming familiar with, just living in dialogue. It's definitely like a different experience than reading a traditional novel, and one that I enjoy and I think is, a bit challenging of an experience for me because I'm not used to reading plays. So I thought I would continue on with that journey. And then I also, on that note, got another book of a play. You may have seen this in a past vlog, but I got this at Housing Works thrift store / bookstore. This is As You Like It by Shakespeare. I love the cover, so that's what drew me to it. But I also, like I said, read A Merchant in Venice a few months ago, and I just want to read more Shakespeare. I read his works in school, obviously, but only a select few. So I read Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth in school. I'd love to reread those, of course, but I also just want to read some of his other famous works. I believe As You Like It is a comedy, so I'm excited for that. I feel like I've read a lot of his tragedies and now I'm dipping my toe into his comedies. So the next book is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. She is an Italian writer, so this is translated fiction. It's book one of the Neapolitan Quartet. I've just heard so much about this book, and I'm sure you have too. I think this was the #1 book on the New York Times 100 Best Books of the Century, or the first quarter of the century. I've just seen so many people fall in love with this book and rave about it, so I knew I had to read it. The story basically just follows these two girls in Naples, and it really is just the story of them coming of age and what girlhood is like. It's all set in Naples in Italy, and so I've heard it's like a good summer read as well, because you're kind of thrown into that coastal world. And so yeah, I just think it's a good book for me to read right now while it's hot out. And I also just love books about girlhood and womanhood, and so I'm really excited to get into this. I've actually started already, and it's one of those books that I could tell right away how special it was, and I can totally see why everyone loves it so much. The writing is so beautiful and poignant. I think the author just describes childhood in such a vivid and realistic way that anyone who reads it will be able to relate to that feeling of being a kid. And so yeah, I'm very excited for this. I have a feeling I'm gonna read all 4 of them just because the writing so far has been absolutely stunning, and it's just the kind of book that I love so much. This is probably my most anticipated read out of, well, I take that back. Giovanni's Room is probably my most anticipated read out of the books that I've purchased, but this is probably my second. So yeah, that's My Brilliant Friend. And then lastly, as you know, I love eBay and Etsy and just, secondhand selling platforms where I can online bookshop. Because sometimes it's fun to go online and try to find pretty books, because I definitely have a certain aesthetic and like a preference for different kinds of design and book covers, and so it's fun to be able to explore online and see what's available, especially because everything is so affordable most of the time. So I got this trilogy. It might not actually be a trilogy. I think maybe there are actually 6 books in the full series, but I got the first 3 books in the Anne of Green Gables series. So this is them. I didn't know it was a series. I've obviously heard of Anne of Green Gables, which is this book, but there, like I said, I think are 6 books. I don't know, I think this will be like a fun, summery, spring read, cottagecore vibes. I'm like, the Gen Z-ification of literature is so funny. Yeah, I definitely love books like Little Women and, Jane Austen novels, things that are very, take place in like gardens and beautiful fields. Like, I think the atmosphere is what draws me to those kinds of books, as well as the plot. So I'm excited to read these. I think it's a children's book, but I love reading children's books. I still read the Chronicles of Narnia and Harry Potter, and I love going to the kids section in the bookstore and just reading like literal children's books, like the picture books. So yeah, I think that'll be fun and just like a nice summer read. Like, this is me. Like, I don't know what to tell you. This is me on the weekends in the park. I love these covers. They're so enchanting and cute. I don't know what's going on, but she's stunning and he's obsessed with her. Anyways, yeah, so excited to read those. That's everything that I have purchased recently in terms of books. It's a lot, and I think, it's nice to get a big haul because now I'm set for like a few months. I'll likely do like a favorite books of 2024 video later in the year, so I guess we'll see if any of these make it in there. I'm actually curious. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you got some inspo for upcoming reads for yourself, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Maybe pick up a book, and I'll talk to you soon.